From IBMTV, International Broadcast Media, this is American Politics, a unique broadcast bringing you in-depth discussions with American leaders in political thought, analysis, and insight, and real-world experience. Without any agenda or traditional gotcha journalism, I invite you, the audience, to share a conversation with our guests. I am Bill Trezevant, your host. Today, we are welcoming our guest, Antione Thompson. And let me begin by saying welcome, Antione. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, and always a privilege and honor to be in your presence, even when it's virtual.
Oh, you are so kind. But the honor is ours, and just so that if I don't mind, I'm going to take a moment, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, but I do want the audience to know a little bit about you. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to go over a bit of your background. Can I?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. Our guest today is Antione M. Thompson, the Executive Director of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the largest organization of African American real estate professionals in the United States. He is also a partner with Creative PMO Solutions, a consulting firm that focuses on diversity, inclusion, and advocacy work, and reflects his over 20 years' experience as a political strategist here in the United States. Antione has an established history of service as a staunch champion of fair housing and community reinvestment by local and national financial institutions. From Buffalo, New York, Antione's past elective offices included election to the Buffalo Common Council, where he authored the Buffalo's fair housing law and secured over $75 million for community development projects. Thereafter, Antione was elected to the New York State Senate in 2004 and again in 2008. During his service in the New York State Senate, Antione served as the New York State Senate Deputy Majority Whip. He also served as chair on the Senate Standing Committee on Environmental Conservation, and he served as co-chair of the Senate Minority and Women Business Enterprise Task Force, where he authored the New York State Minority and Women's Business Enterprise Mentor-Protege Law. In addition, Antione served as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention and member of the Electoral College. This year, Antione was ranked on the Swanee Poll Power 200 list ranking of the most influential and powerful leaders and executives in the residential real estate brokerage industry. It is my pleasure to welcome Antione to American Politics. So that is quite the background. You've been busy since we last spoke in Buffalo. How are you?
I'm doing great. God is in the blessing business, and I'm receiving his blessings every day. My pleasure and privilege to be here with you today and all of your viewers from all across the world.
Fantastic. And they are in for a special treat. I just wanted to dive into just a couple of brief areas. Can you tell us a little bit about your current position as the Executive Director of NARAB?
So currently, I have my hands in a number of things, but my primary job is helping run the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which is the oldest Black real estate association in the country. We focus a lot on advocacy and member services with our primary mission of democracy and housing, trying to bring down the barriers to Black home ownership. There's a 30-point gap in home ownership in the country, with African Americans being at 47% and white Americans being at 76% in home ownership. I'm also involved with Black Politics Today, which is a blog, and then involved with a number of other real estate and consulting businesses as well.
Okay. And, on that point, your organization currently, you are nonpartisan. That is to say that you work with both sides of the
We do. We are, our members are both Democrat and Republican. We believe that there's no party for home ownership, that home ownership is a party for all Americans. And so we work with both Democrats and Republicans to advance the rate of home ownership.
Okay. And I guess because oftentimes, and before we get into some other subjects in a moment, oftentimes we find here in the United States that the state of American politics, people seem to believe that it is so divided that there isn't common ground and that people don't work together. Now, that's not been your experience with NARAB, has it been?
No, I mean, we've had to challenge both Democrats and Republicans on issues. We do have a lot of good people in the Democratic Party that really do a lot for Black ownership. But then there are some in the Republican Party that have been supportive on key issues around Black home ownership as well. So the thing is making sure that we have leaders in Washington that are committed to breaking down the barriers that have historically shut and locked African Americans out of home ownership. We promote accessible, sustainable, and affordable home ownership, and that policies that help us reach that objective.
Okay. Now, Now, on that point, I guess what I'd like to start with is we clearly in a contentious election season, to say the least. This has been quite an unusual year.
It
Uh,
has.
if we can start at the 50,000 foot level, and with your 20 years of experience as a political strategist, both as a candidate, running campaigns, and major national uh, party issues and policy issues, how is it that you're viewing the American electorate as a whole right now as you look across the country? And maybe what issues ought our viewers uh, ought to be focusing in on right now?
Well, I think number one, Americans are very uneasy on both sides of the political spectrum. People are very uneasy. I believe that the pandemic has created a lot of economic uncertainty, a lot of social instability. I believe that the um, police injustice has really opened the eyes of so many Americans of this current generation, and not just generation of the young people, but all generations of just how significant the racial barriers are in the country, where we don't have white only signs at lavatories and lunch counters and water fountains. This year has really shown that there's truly two Americas, one black, one white, separate and unequal. And
Hmm.
and the justice system has shown that the COVID-19, the rate in which African Americans and Hispanic Americans have been dying at a disproportionate rate compared to their population. The fact that a young lady can be asleep in her bed in Louisville, get shot and murdered, and basically very little was done. And so this has really created a moment in the United States that I've not seen since I have been alive. And I've been an activist for a long time, but I think this sustained this disappointment in the criminal justice system, the economic uh, justice and system, the economic inequality that persists. I think that a lot of people are paying attention. So I think that right now there's a lot of uncertainty because of voter suppression and all these other things. That's kind of like a boiling point.
Okay, and on that point, I guess if we were just to kind of focus in a little bit and drill down um, on the election, do you think it's part the issues that are um, energizing the American voter on both sides, and or do you think it's the process of voting that might be causing consternation and people to be kind of agitated? Which
As
one?
as a political strategist, I believe that uh, a lot of this intensity has now shifted not just at the person, but at the policies. and because issues really drive people to the polls. Persons can get you to a certain point, but
Mhm.
whether it's appointments to the Supreme Court, whether it's the civil rights and human rights, whether it's equal work for equal pay, whether it's the fact that folks are trying to eliminate Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act during the height of a pandemic. So there's a lot of things that are really driving it. And then not only that, this effort to deny Americans the right to vote by trickery and by trying to discourage or intimidate people from voting. So it's not one thing, but it's a variety of issues that are moving different segments of the community. I mean, I own a home in the suburbs of DC, uh,
Mhm.
in suburban Maryland,
Mhm.
one of the most affluent counties in America. And when you say that whites need to be concerned about Black people moving to the suburbs, and we own property, we pay our mortgage,
Mhm.
we go to work every day, 50, 60, 70 hours a week.
Mhm.
Uh, White neighbors need to know that they have a responsibility as well to fight back and vote against people who espouse that type of rhetoric, because when you live in a community where the average home ownership rate in my town is well over 70%, and it's mostly whites and Black and brown people in the county, we're outraged by it. It doesn't matter if it was a Democrat saying it or if it was a Republican saying it. When you work every day, you try your best to, make sure the trash is out. You pick the trash up in front of your house, and
Mhm.
you try to make sure that you're a good neighbor.
Yeah.
We no American deserves that type of rhetoric, and we've got every person has a responsibility to shut that down and vote the right way this time
Okay.
around.
Okay, if I can drill down on that, because you mentioned a couple of different items, very very significant items. Now, when you talk about obviously the issues are driving people to an extent, but you mentioned and highlighted that this time around, the process is really energizing people, and I want to drill down on your thoughts on voter suppression and what you've seen been going on here around in this election around the nation. Can you address what you see to be the issues with voter suppression, and particularly if you see them in the swing states,
So
Senator?
it's happening all over the country, some places more than others. But you look at recently in North Carolina, um, lots of African Americans they've already started to be able to vote early and by absentee. Disproportionate number of African Americans votes are being thrown out. So those folks either have to revote or figure out some way to get them some redress through the courts. Secondly, for example, in the state of Maryland, where I'm registered to vote, in the primary, the presidential primary, every Marylander was mailed a ballot so that you can vote, no questions asked, for absentee. In the general election now, you got to get an application, and then once you submit that application, then you can turn it in. So they totally changed from the primary, which was only a few months ago.
Hmm.
So and in other states, it's all different type of craziness. If you didn't vote in the last 4 years, you automatically made an inactive voter. If
Hmm.
they send mail to your house and it comes back, even if they miscoded it, etc., you're taken off the rolls. So there are a lot of different things.
Okay, and if I may ask, because part of it is that for our viewers, because we do have a worldwide audience and they may not know, so please forgive me. I do just kind of want to just present the other side and see if we can get some responses. Now, for example, with regard to purging of the voter rolls, um, one school of thought says that is necessary in order to prevent fraud. But how do you see that? Is it more of a disruptive tactic, or do you think it's a necessary part of the maintenance of for democracy? How do you see that?
So it depends on what the intent is and whether or not we're applying a universal standard, right?
Uh-huh.
If that standard is applied across the entire state in an equal way,
Hmm.
that's one thing. But even the other thing is just because a policy is not intent its intent was not to be discriminatory doesn't mean it is not in fact discriminatory, right?
Okay.
If we say that we mail something only in English to people, right, and everyone in that neighborhood doesn't read English and they don't respond,
Hmm.
then then we use that as a reason to disqualify their ballot or their registration. That's one thing. The other thing is that one of the policies that I don't agree with is that if a person in many states, if they don't vote in 4 years, they're automatically made an inactive voter. Some states say if you don't vote in 2 elections, that they have the right to throw out your ballot.
Hey,
So
I
so purging of the rolls can be a way in which um, uh, we take away the rights of the sovereign right to vote in the country if it's done in an abusive way. The
wait.
same thing about voter ID laws,
Hmm.
saying that you got to have a driver's license. My grandmother voted all the time, but
Hmm.
she never had a car. Not everyone has a driver's license, right? Even a non-driver ID, right? They may have something else that they use for ID that might not be a driver's license. So, there are things that people that they do that can disproportionately impact folks. The same thing where some of these states are saying if you owe fines to the government, you can't vote. That's the equivalent of a poll tax.
Let me ask you this because I want to just kind of ask you. I mean, we've talked about this, and I just want to be very specific. How are how are we supposed to decide? I mean, how are we supposed to know? You say, hey, it depends on the intent. Well, how am I supposed to figure out the intent?
I agree. I completely
No,
agree.
no. If I'm Senator, isn't it true that all I need to do is to look at the impact? Isn't that the most objective way it is for us to be able to judge the intent is by the impact on the voters, or am I wrong about that?
No, you're spot on. I mean, you're spot on. I mean, some of us believe in what we call automatic registration.
Okay.
Uh, you turn 18, you're automatically registered. In a lot of states, if you are a felon, you go to jail. You can either be your voting rights disqualified
Hmm.
or you have to reapply. I don't believe that if you ever go to jail, you should lose your right to vote, right? And I believe that you should have 18, you should automatically be registered to
Okay.
vote, right? Some countries they don't have all this madness, right?
Okay.
And so there are a number of things that need to be changed, and this whole issue in America about trying to take away the franchise,
Uh-huh.
trying to manipulate, come up with tactics and strategies to disenfranchise people. That's a relic of the past
Okay.
of Jim Crow.
Okay.
And women couldn't vote for years. Native Americans and Asians got the right to vote. And then finally, African Americans and Latinos got the right to vote in the 60s. And
Okay.
what I'm saying to you is that we, as all Americans, should be ashamed of these tactics to deny people the right to vote. We're one of the few Western countries that engage in these shameful tactics to deny people the right to vote.
Okay, and I certainly hear you on that point, but I want to ask you the same question about enfranchisement by what the other side would call or term as dirty tricks. Down in Florida, they passed a law that said, or an amendment to the Constitution allowing ex-felons who have served their time to vote, provided they paid their the fees associated with their debt to society. Now, recently, billionaire Michael Bloomberg has set up an organization and raised funds to pay off the outstanding fines to allow at least 32,000 felons to satisfy their financial obligations in order for them to vote. Isn't that just stacking the deck from the other side, as some conservatives and Republicans will charge of the Democrats? So isn't that the same thing?
So the Constitution, is really strange. So it gave all Americans the right to vote, provided that it gave all Americans the right to vote. Right? We always celebrate this, right? It gave all Americans the right to vote. However, African Americans only had it temporarily because then all these states came up with this madness, and we had to amend. Then we had to say, oh, now you got the right to vote again. And then we talk about voting rights, which really the 15th Amendment says that you get the right to vote. So we're always a strange thing. The other thing is that the 13th Amendment eliminated slavery, except the dirty deal was we abolished slavery, except when you're incarcerated. So we then incarcerate people. We tell people they get the 15th Amendment, they had a right to vote, except then we have all these state laws that then say if you are incarcerated in the state, we take away your voting rights, either temporarily or permanently. And what I'm simply saying is, I think what Mike Bloomberg did was nice. However, I think as Americans, we need to revisit this issue of every person who is born here or is naturalized should have the right to vote, unfettered access to the right to vote. That nothing's more precious in America than the right to vote and liberty and freedom. And one of your basic freedoms and one of your basic liberties is the right to vote and to participate in this democracy, and that nothing going to jail does not stop you from being a citizen, right? It does not. If someone hurts you in the country, there's still certain rights you have in prison, and Mike Bloomberg shouldn't have to pay any fines. You should not be denied the right to vote because you were incarcerated and you owe a debt to the prisons. That doesn't apply to anything else. That's because it disproportionately impacts people of color and poor whites and poor Latinos and other folks. Rich people don't have that problem, so that's why they're less alarmed about it.
Okay, so you see all of those laws, particularly like the amendment in Florida, as an attempt to continue the systematic disenfranchisement of people of color and African Americans.
I think we need to further that law. Take off that requirement of that, because if that person owes money, it should not be linked to their right to vote. That's what I'm simply saying. We don't say if you owe a parking ticket to the city of Dallas that you can't vote. We don't do that. We know that that's a form of a poll tax. So why should we say because you went to jail that you can't vote? That's all I'm simply saying. That's another case in point. Years ago, women couldn't sign contracts. They needed their husband to do it, even if the lady had the money. I mean, could you imagine in 2020, your woman makes $200,000, she has an 800 credit score, but they got to put the house in your name? What type of madness would that be? So all I'm simply saying is that This is another situation that should not be tolerated because it's bias, whether for race, class, income, or gender, is
Okay,
biased.
I want to drill down on that in this way. That is to say that, and it's related, but I want to pivot slightly. And that's the issue of, what is the state of racial justice right now? And what does it look like from your viewpoint and your 20 years of experience? And what can be done? Because I hear that there's some long-standing, simmering structural complaints in certain schools of thought, and I'd like to get your viewpoint on it. And so, specifically, what is it that you see the current state of racial progress, lack of progress, or racial justice is currently in this very complex year?
So there are a number of things. So first of all, we need leadership. We need leadership coming out of Washington that's going to be decisive and take action. And that's simply not happening right now. And it's not happening for a variety of reasons. Number one, when the historically, when our streets and cities were on fire, Congress and the White House came together to pass legislation to address that crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that was the passage of the Fair Housing Act and other policies in 1968, whether
Mm-hmm.
it was the Voting Rights Act, a number of things, creation of HUD in the 60s. A lot of these things were done in response to the simmering unrest in the streets of America. We have been basically tone deaf in 2020
Mm-hmm.
at the federal level in response to the death of George Floyd, Mr. Arbery in Georgia, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, et cetera, and the countless others, mostly African American, but white and Hispanic as well. And so, to me, it's heartbreaking that race relations and race issues to address race relations out of Washington have really not been taken seriously.
Okay. Okay. Well, if that's an analysis of what of currently where we're at, I mean, how do we get out of this? I mean, because there are
So corporations.
Senator, there are myriad of voices, and everybody's advocating a different view. And it's kind of like these days, like you're surfing the internet. You really don't know which way to turn, and you got all.
There are things that we can do. Number one, we can pass the vote. We can pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Okay.
We can make sure that we deal with police reform. Right. We can deal with police reform. I'm a progressive guy. However, I love good police. No one's anti-police. We want responsible policing. Who's not for responsible policing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a black guy. I have been falsely arrested. I have been pulled over, driving while black, shopping while black, all that. However, at the same time, I used to ride when I was on the city council in Buffalo at night with the police on Friday nights. I used to have a walkie-talkie, not a walkie-talkie, but a police radio in my car to listen to the police, to make sure that they're responding. We all want good police. We all want good police. It used to be endorsed by the state police and the sheriffs, and a couple of times the Buffalo Police Benevolence. So we want good police, but we want responsible policing. All right, we want responsible. So the other thing is that we need to deal with inequality in America. Prior to George Floyd, we went through a period this last 10 years since Obama became president in 2008. We went through a period where there was this bubbling up of anti-political correctness. Say what you want to say. Think how you want to think. We don't care. We don't care if we offend you, your race, your class, your gender, etc. We went through that period. We also went to this, what they call the so-called black backlash. We or black fatigue is what they used to call it when I was in the state Senate, because African American, we had a guy in the White House. I remember in New York, we had a black guy as governor. We had a black guy as governor of Massachusetts, 2 governors out of 50 in the country, but we suffer from black fatigue. And so, and we had a situation where over the last 10 or so years, where individuals were saying blacks have got enough, even though racial inequality in terms of education, attainment, health disparities, business inclusion and utilization, unfair sentencing in the courts, all of that was still taking place. And we had this spirit of thinking that blacks were getting too much at the expense of whites. And it would not have, if it were not for the death of George Floyd and the pandemic at the same time, people still would be in a state of denial, because now the corporate community has said, you know what, these black folks have a legitimate point. Citigroup just put out a report yesterday that talked about the racism in the country has cost over $10 trillion.
Okay. Well, but senators.
So this is not rhetoric. This is like reality, but people would not feel comfortable finally saying what they are going to do to change it if it were not for the death of one guy.
Okay. Well, certainly that's true this year, but I think it's safe to say that George Floyd's death, murder, as some would put it, is part of a long line of.
It is.
In fairness,
like a powder keg.
Okay.
You know, people had pent up anger, they've been frustrated, but when it came on TV, it was like Rodney King in 1992 or whatever year that was in the 90s, and the people said, "Here it is." And now this is what I've been talking about. Okay. You know, Colin Kaepernick has been saying it, but you know, even with Trayvon Martin and etc., people didn't want to believe it. They were like, "Oh, you know, made excuses."
No, I certainly understand that, Senator Thompson. But I guess the question is this: that for those people here in America who, you know, just finally, they're people of goodwill, who are generally silent and aren't coming either from the far left or the far right, that are just kind of in the center, that want just reasonableness and some sort of stability. The question is, if we understand that that has been the frustration from the past, and if we understand, and we've seen this year, that that is what is boiling over in the streets, then what is it that we can do? Is it voting? Is it the leadership? Is it the private economy? What is it that we can do? Because
it's not one thing.
Senator, earlier you talked about black fatigue. I think right now, and don't you believe? And does this resonate with you? Could it be true that a vast swath of the American public is just tired and wants to just finally do something?
I think that this year, I think a fair amount of, the polling is showing that a lot of Americans want to do something now, and that's why I said a few minutes ago that's why you need leadership out of the White House, because this is a time when you can act, because so much of America does believe that we can do some things. I don't have all the answers, but I will share with you that there are some things that we can do. Number one, we can get board diversity on these corporations. We can address the issue. I'm glad to see that so many companies are saying we must invest in black businesses, right? That, when riots start and they say, we've done a lousy job of trying to grow black businesses. We saw that with the PPP. We need to get very serious about that. We need to get very serious about home ownership. Because we know that this country has a long history of denying black people access to land ownership. And then when they do, either giving them bad mortgages, burning their farms, firebombing their churches, destroying their businesses, and trying to dismantle our financial institutions. So that's a perfect thing. Helping people help themselves is a great solution for all Americans. The other thing is to deal with this issue around policing in a dual. We have a dual credit system, we have a dual education system, and we have a dual justice system. If we can fix those three things, right? Justice, housing,
Hmm.
and business, the business environment. I think those are three things that most Americans can say we shouldn't even be fighting about that. Who? Let's get the players in the room and let's finally do something about it.
Okay, well, you raise a very interesting point there, and I just want to kind of tease it out. I want to drill down a bit and tease it out. But um, in the past, whenever we've seen um, interest groups or advocacy groups that begin with either Hispanic Americans or Black Americans or places like, say, the Congressional Black Caucus Political Action Committee,
Mhm.
vast swath of the American politic have seen that as the advocacy of a special interest group rather than it being a broad political action committee that has relevance to their lives. So, for example, with your organization, the National Association of Real Estate, Black Real Estate Professionals, the political action portion of your organization advocates for not racially non-racially based policies just to increase home ownership, but with a particular emphasis. Now, isn't that true with all other say organizations that begin with the term say black, like a Black Political Action Committee? Are we at the point where Americans will begin to see, say, something like the Congressional Black Caucus Political Action Committee, not as a special interest group, but rather as an American interest group? What are your thoughts on that, Senator?
I'm not sure if we're at that point. I think we should be at a point where, as I was taught as a young person, that America is like a salad. Uh, we have we have cucumbers in there, we have tomatoes, we got peppers, we got lettuce, we got all different types of unique things in there. But at the end of the day, we have a salad, and that might be a garden salad, it might be a fruit salad, but the salad has different things in it, and so and all those things are important to the quality of the salad and the nutrition of your body. And so I would say to Americans that um, that's the type of America that I think that that we need to elevate, not the America that says we just want a salad with just lettuce and dressing on it, but we want a real hearty salad, a nutritious salad that respects the diversity of vegetables that are grown in this country and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the America that I think we need to lift up. And whether we have one salad has more strawberries in it than it has apples, or whether it has more carrots in it than it has cucumbers, at the end of the day, it's still an American salad that's good for everyone to eat.
Okay.
And we're less concerned about who has more on their plate than others. That everyone has a chance to eat, to grow, and to prosper as a result of that salad and contribute to the making of that salad.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, and that's very much in tune with the history of America, the adage, the melting pot, the great mixer of people, and the achievement of a multicultural society. Let me ask you, how do you, because I want to pivot a bit, because it is so broad. With regard, we are currently, as you know, in an economic induced, well, a pandemic induced economic coma. And we are in a real bad way right now. Now,
Yeah.
you've got various prescriptions for how we get out, how we rescue our economy. How do you see our economy right now? And what do you see as the essential ingredients for our ability collectively as Americans to pull ourselves out of the economy? What pillars would you identify that we ought to build on?
So there are a few things that I would say. Number one is that we have to do more to invest on Main Street. Congress did, with the support of the current president, um, did invest in a Main Street relief program. It's my understanding that money has been slow to hit the streets. I think that we need to add more money to the EIDL program, which was an SBA program that provided grants and some loans up to a couple $100,000 or more. And so we need to really invest in small business. We need to make it easier for small businesses and nonprofit and trade groups to get access to the Paycheck Protection Program. We need to make sure that we invest more in job training and placement, because some jobs that were lost may not come back, or they're coming back slowly. So we need to really think about that. We need to also invest a considerable amount of money into housing rehabilitation so that we can rebuild these neighborhoods in a stronger way, providing millions of dollars to community development corporations and these low to moderate income neighborhoods, so we can deal with the thousands in some areas of homes that are in code violations, have code violations, so mom and pop contractors can grow their workforce by fixing up homes, fixing up old dilapidated buildings and neighborhoods. It's not going to be one quick fix. The other thing is making sure that we can focus on the jobs of the future and in green industry in our communities. There are a lot of companies. When I was in the state Senate of New York, we had a growing green business economy. In some areas of the country, they're doing that better than others. Unfortunately, too many of your solar panels are made overseas. Too many of the products for green businesses are made overseas. And a lot of these things are going to continue to change. Now we have water tanks in your home that are more energy efficient, that use 80% less water than we did years ago. The same thing with washing machines and things of that nature. So what I'm saying is we need to invest in those businesses to make them greener, leaner, and smarter, and have those products manufactured in the United States. And let me just say that this one last thing, if I could. One thing we learned from the pandemic is that it really broke my heart, was the fact that so much of the protective gear that Americans need had to be imported. And that's tragic. A lot of governors, and working with the White House as well, but a lot of governors scrambled, used taxpayer resources to be able to get more American companies in their state to start making PPP. But I think what we need is a leadership out of DC and out of these state capitals that will focus on basic things that Americans need to make sure that those things are made in America. The fact that you had to get a mask made overseas to protect somebody in the United States, and hand sanitizer and other basic things, I think is a travesty for all of us in positions of leadership.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, what I want to do is I want to drill down. I mean, you talk generally about the economic recovery, and I have two questions. So, if you may, because I know you're very good, which is why you've been elected at least 7 times or 4 times. I forget. You just keep winning. But it's simply this: that when you talk about government involvement in restoring and or reclaiming the economy, are you thinking about an activist federal government, say on the model maybe of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or are you thinking of some other kind of model?
So let me say this. I think that no one president is perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So each of the presidents have different things that they have done that have helped the economy. So President Obama was good with helping to save the auto industry and restarting them. Trump was, I think, good on certain areas of helping certain businesses restart and creating a climate, building on Obama's climate for growth. FDR invested in some of the public works projects that were helpful. But the thing is, what I would say to you is, no one president has done enough. Each of them, the Achilles heel for all of them, in my humble opinion, is that they all have had limited success in making sure the African Americans participate in an economic resurgence and recovery.
Okay.
Under FDR, we still had segregation in the military. We
Hmm.
had redlining that existed. Under Obama, President Obama, we made some progress with minority and women business inclusion, but it was not at the rate that I would have liked. And under Trump, we saw what happened with the PPP program, where African over 40 is projected over 40% of Black businesses will go out of business during this pandemic. So there's no one president whose policies have been so memorable to the Black experience in terms of building Black wealth.
Okay, well, I guess on that point, what I want to ask then about is this: is that how it's been a persistent, pernicious issue, and that is to increase the role of minority participation in the workforce. And I know that you've been an advocate that, and I forget how you framed it. They should be that African Americans should be uh,
Participants, not spectators, in this contact sport that we call life. As we rebuild America and we try to turn things around economically, we do not want African Americans to be spectators as we invest in neighborhoods. And I can tell you this firsthand. I'll
mm,
never forget a story. I want to share the story with you folks. I remember being on a city council in Buffalo, and I was at a caucus meeting, and that's where all the members get together to talk about what's going to be on the agenda for the meeting the following day. I'll never forget a council member who wasn't a member of color who said to me, "Your constituents, they don't care about working on a project; they just want something done in their neighborhood." And I was so disappointed. This is someone who called themselves to be a quasi-progressive individual. Well, I had to really politely help them understand that we want both. We want real investment in our community, but we also want to make sure that our businesses and our residents also get access to the jobs and the business opportunities that come as a result of government investment. And so that has been a challenge. Challenge number one is always getting the government to make adequate and responsible investments in our neighborhoods. And
uh-huh.
then the second challenge is making sure that our people are working on the job as either as contractors, suppliers, or vendors, or as workers.
Okay, because you see, when you were talking earlier about addressing this issue, not only of the income gap and or the wealth gap, generation over generation, but then there's also the daily "do I have a job" gap. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that the question is, do you fill that with quotas? Do you fill that with percentages? Because we've tried so many different ways in the history of the United States, at least since the early 70s, to try to address this issue, but nothing seems to be working. And quite frankly, it's been 50 years, Senator. And if I can take a point of personal privilege on this, I mean, it's been going on as long as I've been alive, and now I'm 52. So, and I haven't seen enough progress. But I'm asking you, in our generation, can we finally break this? And if so, how do we do it?
So I would say that we didn't get here overnight. We have to, the American people must adopt restorative policies to turn this around, because we had a GI Bill that sent whites to college and sent blacks to vocational schools. We had a GI Bill that helped suburbanize America, that African Americans cannot use when they came home from World War II, the Korean War, et cetera, that they couldn't use to buy a house. And then we have people who have the audacity to say everyone's got to be treated fairly, when that has never been the real experience for Black people in America, even when you have money. And so, and then when we talk about from the mid 60s through the early 2000s, I mean, once we started some form of affirmative action, we had a whole movement to try to say reverse discrimination. When freaking people had PhDs couldn't get, blacks that had PhDs couldn't get jobs beyond being janitors because of the laws in the states that you know, prevented blacks from getting certain jobs.
Okay.
And so at some point, we've got to say, we have to, as they say in the community, we got to own up, we got to man up, we got to woman up and be honest with people and say, we've got to adopt these restorative policies for the next 100 years
Okay.
because 5 years is not enough. We have just witnessed another generation of young people have just witnessed this type of foolishness in terms of racism and bigotry. So it's going to take at least 2 more generations of young people to undo what has just been taught, witnessed this year alone.
Okay,
It's going to take at least 2 generations of young people to undo the foolishness that we have just taught them, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
okay, well, okay. I appreciate that, Senator. But I guess the other school of thought, and in fairness, I just want to ask this question point blank. Some would say from another school of thought that when you say restorative, you really just mean reparations. Is there a difference really between what you're talking about, restorative, or what other people are talking about being reparations? And I know that that's
there's a difference. I mean, so you can have restorative policies that don't, when we think of reparations, people usually think about giving someone some type of payment. Now, I support reparations, but I also support restorative policies, because you can have restorative policies can also include payment, right? So you have ex-offenders that go to prison. Try to restore them. We try to get them and pay for them to get some training, right? So they get their life together because they were incarcerated, right? We have people who have substance abuse. We try to get them back on track, and we come up with restorative things to help them. When we talk about reparations, that's also a situation where individuals who never were apologized to for being enslaved, then discriminated overtly, openly discriminated against for over 100 years. Okay. And so we've never fully addressed it. We've done a lot of piecemeal things. We've tried to enact legislation time after time. There have been so many civil rights laws that have been passed over the last 200 years in America, only to be undone by another law, right? And so it wasn't just in the 1960s. America has been passing civil rights laws for over 150 years, only to be amended and those rights taken away. And I think what you have is every 10 or 15 years, it's just bubbling up because people get tired and one situation makes it explode. And that's where we are here. And I think as America, we need to come to that realization that we need to adopt the saying, now is the time that we finally do something.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, you're saying that restorative policies are more along the line of like the GI Bill and assistance with down payment on first-time home ownership for Americans, rather than reparations. Although reparations is a subset of generally restorative kinds of policies.
I think they could be in that same space, so to speak.
Okay.
One of the restorative policies could be an African American home ownership program like they have for Native Americans. But the point I'm getting at is those are restorative policies, and we still, in addition to that, we still need to address reparations because of the fact that we started down that path for African Americans during Reconstruction, and that was a dirty deal that was cut to stop it, and it was never fully implemented. And even those who did get land, they couldn't get credit. Their land was burned. People failed today to recognize that a lot of African Americans had to flee their land that they owned because the Union Army the government stopped protecting them from white terrorists. I mean, that's another story and those people were never paid. Even white owners who owned slaves got paid, but the black people still haven't gotten paid. And even those that did get reparations, many of them got chased off their land.
Okay, I certainly understand that, and I certainly understand and appreciate the passion that our American history has produced. But it seems to me that because I want to make sure that our audience clearly understands you. Your message is fundamentally optimistic, but what I hear you saying is that in order to get to that optimism, we have to have some tough, honest talk here at home. Am I correct in that, or am I?
We are. I think that the best days of America are ahead of us. They're not behind us. That it's not rocket science on what we need to do. We need to have an honest conversation, followed by putting together honest policies honest policy that comes out of a bold vision for the future. And I think that at this point in time in America, people want to see action. I mean, the fact that we have this big gap in inequality, we have 70% of the land is vacant in the country. People live on like 20% of the land. So if the issue is about land, let's give people land. We got so much damn land in the country. It's crazy. So we need a president, and we need a Congress, and we need governors and mayors who get it, who want to fix this problem. The other thing is that we can do it. We can get people on the moon, but we can't figure out who's selling drugs and doing drive-by shootings in neighborhoods. We can figure out who has poison grapes to a former president and get grapes that were contaminated in the 90s, because we don't know whose plate they might end on, but we can't figure out these other issues. So Americans are very smart, and we have a lot of smart friends around the world. I'm just simply saying to you that now is the time for leadership and for action.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do is this, and I certainly appreciate that. As you know, for our audience, we've known each other now for over 3 decades, from the ins and outs of Buffalo
man.
Politics. And I know it's your hometown and mine as well. And so I always like to give you the opportunity to give a shout out to our hometown. You got any kind words for people in Buffalo that might be watching this program?
Yeah, my heart is always with the city of Buffalo. I am there at least 2 weekends a month. Love Buffalo, love all my Buffalonians, my good Buffalo Wings, my good Buffalo Bills, and my family that's there. Special shout out to my son Joseph, or Big Joe as they call him at Nichols High School, and also want to shout out to the Realtors and my mom as well. So good. Love Buffalo. Love all the people of Buffalo. I would not be where I am in life if it were not for the great people of the city of Buffalo. We love you.
And you are so right, Antoine, because it really is the foundation upon which we build everything else. Much like America, if we have a strong foundation, then we can go far. I, again, am honored that you are a guest on our program. I want you to know that you have a standing invitation anytime you want, and all you have to do is let me know, because you're a welcome guest, an honored friend, and a cherished individual in our book. So with that, I will say thank you, and until we see each other again. Okay.
And thanks for having me, and everyone, make sure you vote.
All right. Well, that is another conversation here on American politics. These conversations that we bring to you in each episode are meant to drill down and begin to ask some of the tough questions, questions that people have in their minds, and about people that are affecting decisions in our future. They're not always the elected people, but sometimes they're the men and women who operate the organizations that help get people elected and or help form policy. Today, former state senator Antione Thompson, who is the one of the top 200 most influential people and up and comers here in American politics, has expressed his ideas and thoughts about what we have done, what we need to do, and where we might go. And so, for that, I thank you again for tuning in here to American Politics. I look forward to you joining us again. Uh, on behalf of IBMTV, International Broadcast Media, smart television for a smarter global community, from dictatorships to democracies around the world, I'm your host for American Politics, Bill Trezevant. Thank you and good night.